Hey everyone, this is Dan Sheahan, staff member of the Reference Department at the Fall River Public Library, bringing you another exciting chapter of Fall River history in 15 minutes. Today I'm going to take a swing at a very famous murder case, something which is still very much in the popular imagination over 130 years later after it happened. That's right, folks, we're going to be talking about the Borden murders and the infamous Lizzie Borden. So obviously, many books have been written about this topic. I certainly don't have an axe to grind against any particular theory, or I certainly don't have any theory that I wish to put forward. I do want to cover, the general facts about the case, some of the suspects and motives involved, and of course, the lasting appeal and why people still talk about the case today. So I've drawn from many different sources here. So I'm going to be quoting from a couple of good essays, internet sites, and other citations. I like to start off first with a general overview of the case, and this comes from local author John Red Cummings' book, Murder, Manslaughter, and Mayhem on the South Coast, in which he basically does a very good job of, he covers other notorious murders that have happened here in Fall River in the South Coast area, but he also has a really nice section on the Lizzie Borden case, and I'm just gonna read it verbatim because John did a great job of summing it up. So here it goes. The crime: the unsolved hatchet murders of Andrew and Abby Borden in their home on 92 2nd Street, Fall River, Massachusetts, on August 4th, 1892. The victims: Andrew Jackson Borden and Abby Durfee Gray Borden, ages 70 and 64. The accused: Lizzie Andrew Borden, 32, the daughter of Andrew Borden. Now, it's very difficult to construct an accurate retelling of the murder of Andrew and Abby Borden. There have been numerous authors who have done their best to describe the events of that morning, mostly framing their telling from an assumption of guilt of one of the characters. According to Borden expert Stephanie Corey, one of the problems with this enigmatic case is that the timelines of those involved, where they were before, during, and after the crimes, are inconsistent within themselves and in comparison to other versions of the events, And of course, Lizzie Borden, famous for her contrary explanations, in her inquest testimony, offered up different accounts of her whereabouts that fateful morning. While her contradictory answers may be due to stress and the doses of morphine that she had been given to calm her nerves by family physician Dr. Seabury Bowen, her inability to remember properly where she was and exactly what she was doing has been the subject of debate for over a century. That being said, we can be sure of only these facts: that on Thursday morning, August 4th, 1892, a person or persons unknown at approximately 9:30 a.m. killed Abby Borden in the second-floor guest room with a hatchet, striking her 19 times about the head. 90 minutes later, at approximately 11 a.m., Andrew Borden was likewise felled by 11 hatchet blows to his head as he was resting on a sofa in the first-floor sitting room. The only other persons who were present in and about that house during those hours were the 32-year-old daughter of Andrew Borden, Lizzy, and the family maid, Bridget Sullivan, who was in and out of the house as she washed the windows. Emma Borden, Lizzie's oldest sister by 9 years, was away visiting friends in Fairhaven, Massachusetts. The police quickly focused on Lizzie as the main suspect because her behavior was judged to be curious. She remained calm, did not cry or become hysterical as they expected she might, and famously replied to a question regarding the murder of her mother, Abby Borden, "She is not my mother, she is my stepmother." The murders of Andrew and Abby Borden occurred in an era before fingerprint technology became an established method of police investigation. By today's standards of forensic science, the police work in the Borden murders seems crude, sloppy, and disorganized. The evidence that remains for us to examine comes from various sources: primary source documents, such as the inquest, the preliminary hearing, and the trial documents, as well as collections of artifacts in private and nonprofit sources. One of the best sources, of course, the Fall River Historical Society, which has the largest collection of resources from the case, including photographs, letters, personal papers, Abby's hair switch, the handless hatchet, presented at trial as a possible murder weapon, and the bloody quilts and pillow shams from the guest room where Abby Borden was killed. The supposed crime scene photographs are misnamed. These images were taken by a police photographer at approximately 3 p.m., some 4 to 5 hours after the crimes. As such, these images must be viewed with skepticism. They are merely location shots of the placement of the bodies at the time of the crimes, with both Andrew and Abby having been moved by many doctors and policemen soon after their deaths. The bodies were returned to their assumed positions, with care taken to arrange their clothing and shoes for the sake of propriety. Lizzie Borden testified at the inquest held August 9th to 11th, 1892, without the benefit of counsel, even though a warrant had been issued for her arrest on August 3rd, but had not been served. Because of this fact, her inquest testimony was ruled inadmissible at trial. Lizzie was arraigned on August 12th, pled not guilty, and sent to Taunton, Massachusetts to await the next stages of her legal ordeal. A preliminary hearing was held on August 25th to September 1st, and the grand jury heard evidence in this case, among others, from November 7th to 21st. Because Lizzie and Emma's friend Alice Russell approached the police to inform them that she had witnessed Lizzie burn a dress in the stove at the kitchen on Sunday after the murders, the grand jury was reconvened on December 1st, and Russell testified to what she saw. Because of this, it is believed an indictment was handed down charging Lizzie Borden with the murder of Andrew and Abby Borden. She was arraigned on May 8th, 1893, in the Superior Court in New Bedford. The trial of the century, with Lizzie as the accused, took place before an all-male jury in New Bedford, Massachusetts, in June of 1893. Former Massachusetts Governor George D. Robinson, Andrew J. Jennings, and Melvin O. Adams represented Lizzie and were considered by modern scholars as a dream team. The prosecutor for the Commonwealth was William H. Moody, a future United States Attorney General and Associate Justice of the Supreme Court, and great-uncle of the author's friend, Michael Moody. The trial lasted from June 5th to June 20th. The prosecution asserted that Lizzie Borden was a killer and that her motive was financial. There was no eyewitness testimony, and all evidence was circumstantial. Lizzie was never seen with blood on her, even though she called for Bridget to come quick, someone has killed father, moments after the last crime, and appeared clean and dry. Testimony from a druggist at Smith's drugstore that Lizzie Borden had attempted to purchase prussic acid to reportedly clean her sealskin cape the day before the murders was not allowed in court. The jury deliberated barely 1 hour and returned a verdict of not guilty. The outcome? There was no sentencing, as Lizzie Borden was acquitted of the crimes. So Lizzie and her older sister Emma later on purchased 7 French Street, now 306, in the Lower Highland area of Fall River in 1893, and Lizzie lived there until her death in 1927. Emma left the house and her sister in 1905. Emma died in New Market, New Hampshire, 9 days after her sister Lizzie. The enduring doggerel skip rope rhyme continues to be recited over 100 years later, even though the facts of the case were not in the least represented by the poem. This is, of course, a famous poem that many know from childhood. Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks, and when she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. Well, so how about it? Let's talk about who we think did it, the suspects and their motives, and I took this next section from a online site called Famous Trials by Professor Douglas O. Linder, and this is his 14 reasons to believe Lizzie murdered her parents. Number 1, if not Lizzie, then who? Only Lizzie had a good opportunity to commit the murders. At the time of her mother's murder, around 9:30 a.m., household guest John Morse was visiting relatives, Sister Emma was out of town, Andrew Borden was running errands around town, and maid Bridget Sullivan was outside washing windows. Only Lizzie was known to be in the house at the time of Abby Borden's murder. To commit both murders, Andrew Borden was murdered around 11 a.m., an outside intruder would have to either have had to hide in the house for 90 minutes or departed and then returned without being seen. Number 2, it looks like an inside job. Police found no evidence of forced entry into the Borden home, despite the fact that the Bordens habitually locked their doors, and nothing appeared to have been stolen. No stranger was seen entering or leaving the Borden house or on the morning of the murders. Number 3, although Lizzie claimed to have been downstairs at the very time her mother was violently murdered upstairs, she said she heard no alarming noises. This despite her mother having been struck multiple times with an axe and falling to the floor. Actually, a hatchet, I should say. Number 4, on August 3rd, the day before the murders, Witnesses identify Lizzie Borden as having visited Smith's drugstore in Fall River when she attempted to purchase a poison, prussic acid. She explained that she needed the acid to clean a sealskin cape. The druggist refused to sell the prussic acid. Number 5, on the night before the murders, Lizzie visited a neighbor, Alice Russell, and told her that she feared that some unintended enemy of her father's might soon try to kill him. Number 6, Lizzie told police that while she was alone in the house with her mother on the morning of the murder, a messenger came to the door with a note summoning her mother to visit a sick friend. Lizzie told people that she assumed her mother had left. Despite a thorough search of the Borden home, no such alleged note ever was found. Number 7, when Bridget Sullivan came back inside after having finished washing outside windows around 10:30 a.m., she reported hearing a muffled laugh coming from upstairs. She assumed that it was Lizzie making the noise. Lizzie, of course, denied being upstairs during this time period before her mother's murder and her father's murder. Number 8, at the time of the murder of Andrew Borden, Lizzie claimed to have been in the loft in the backyard barn for 15 to 20 minutes looking for lead sinkers for a fishing excursion. Police found the loft so stiflingly hot that it was difficult to believe anyone would voluntarily remain in such a place for as much as 20 minutes. They also found no footprints in the loft that could substantiate Lizzie's story. Number 9, Lizzie had a strained relationship with her stepmother. They usually ate their meals separately. Some theorize that Lizzie resented the fact that her father transferred a Fall River property to Abby's sister rather than to her. Police noted that during her interview, Lizzie insisted that Abby be described as her stepmother, not her mother. Number 10, although Lizzie appeared to have a somewhat better relationship with her distant and forbidding father, there are problems there as well. Lizzie was outraged, for example, when her father beheaded pigeons in the barn loft for which she had built a roost. Her father thought the pigeons attracted neighborhood boys who broke into the barn to hunt the pigeons. Number 11, in the weeks before the murders, following an apparent family argument, Lizzie and her sister Emma left Fall River by coach for New Bedford. When Lizzie returned, she chose to stay in a rooming house for 4 days rather than in her own room in the family residence. Number 12, in 1891, cash and jewelry was stolen from the master bedroom in the Borden home. It was an open secret that Lizzie was suspected as having been the thief. Lizzie also had been accused by several local merchants of shoplifting. Yes, murder is far different than stealing, but it does suggest that Lizzie was hardly a model daughter. Number 13, immediately after the discovery of her parents' bodies, Lizzie sent various persons who came to help off on various errands. It seems strange that a woman would choose to remain alone in a house if she thought a murder still might be nearabouts on the loose. Number 14, on August 7th, 3 days after the murders, Alice Russell observed Lizzie burning a blue corduroy dress in a kitchen fire. When asked about it, Lizzie explained that she chose to destroy the dress because it was stained with old paint. Now, who else falls under suspicion? Well, of course, many people suspect Emma, her sister, as either doing it by herself or with Lizzie. Emma and Lizzie's tumultuous relationship with Abby and Andrew were suspected to be the prime reason for the murders by some. Reportedly, they often had arguments with their parents over property inheritance. According to sources, months before the murders, Andrew had gifted a portion of his real estate to various branches of Abby's family. Later, Emma and Lizzie, too, demanded their share. They, however, received their home they were living in until Sarah died. A few weeks before the murders, the Borden sisters bought the rental property from their father for just $1. They later sold the property back to him for $5,000. So, we have Emma. Then, we also have David Anthony. David Anthony was a local gentleman vying for Lizzie's affection. Andrew Borden refused to give his permission for David and Lizzie to marry, so David took action. Rumor has it he killed Andrew and Abby Borden to liberate Lizzie from their strict control. In an interview with Jack Wiggins of the Ellsworth, Maine American, a nurse by the name of Ruby Frances Cameron told of an interaction she had with Lizzie herself while on the deathbed. Needless to say, there is no evidence for this theory. And we have John Morse. John Morse was the brother-in-law to Andrew Borden and to Emma, and and Lizzie he was just Uncle John. On the night before the murder, John came to visit, arriving with nothing more than the suit on his back. Andrew had requested an in-person chat with him to discuss business. That chat turned into an argument, as John had lost money in a joint livestock venture. Andrew was infuriated. That night, John slept in the guest room that would later be the room where Abby Borden was killed. When John left the house the next morning, it could easily have been after the murders. Some claim he got into an argument with Abby as she was tidying the room, and that argument led to her death. He left the home, went to visit his niece, Annie, who was ill. When questioned later by the police, he claimed that he had returned to the Borden house at noon. That time later changed to 11:30 and then to 11:20. Dr. Bowen, the family physician, was already on the scene at 11:32 a.m. With his timeline changing, not once but twice, can John Morse be trusted at all? Then we have Bridget Sullivan, the maid. Bridget Sullivan was the Borden family maid. On the day of the murder, Bridget was in her third-floor bedroom, resting after washing windows, when just after 11:10 a.m., she heard Lizzie call out to her from downstairs, "Maggie, come quick, Father's dead." Somebody came in and killed him. Bridget was sometimes called Maggie, which happened to be the name of a previous family maid. After the investigation and trial, Bridget moved to Montana, never to discuss the case again. That is until she was on her deathbed. Bridget had a friend, Minnie Green, who had migrated from Ireland to Butte, Montana. Bridget sent word to her that she wanted to see her and tell her something in person. It was then that Bridget finally told her of her time with the Borden family. She claimed that she liked Lizzie and often took part during troubles in the house. She even admitted that she helped Lizzie out at the trial. Minnie didn't press for more information, as her friend was so ill. She promised that she would never tell what she had been told, and kept that promise until after Bridget had died. So we have many suspects and many theories, and it remains a mystery to this day. And we have to admit that it certainly has been a lasting appeal to this case. 130 years later, the Lizzie Borden case still looms large in American folklore, popular culture, and even popular entertainment. A 2016 Rolling Stone article by Elizabeth Yuko explains its enduring appeal. Lizzie's was one of the first trials in American history that both fueled and was fueled by major mass-market newspapers and magazines. Moreover, she was a media sensation because her trial exposed the sleazy shortcomings of high society, which delighted the poor masses. The case ripped aside a curtain that covered and concealed a kind of dry rot, a concealed pathology, wrote Stanford legal historian Lawrence M. Friedman, one which arguably was eating away at the pillars of respectable society. In the Borden case, the prosecution, and in turn the media, used the trial to convey that the wealthy are not exempt from unsavory, violent behavior. Lizzie's defense was in some ways a defense of upper-class society, an attempt to demonstrate that someone from her background could not have possibly committed a brutal murder. This clash of ideologies and opposing narratives made for a compelling copy, and newspapers and the public ate it up. Once the media created Lizzie Borden as a persona and celebrity, the process was self-sustaining. The more Lizzie became a household name, the more newspapers people would purchase. Now, outside of the press and the ubiquitous Lizzie Borden took an axe nursery rhyme, Lizzie has been a lasting figure in pop culture. There was an Agnes de Mille 1954 ballet, Fall River Legend, and the 1965 opera, Lizzie Borden, the concept recently updated as a rock opera called Lizzy, the Musical. In 1975, there was a made-for-TV movie, The Legend of Lizzie Borden, starring Bewitch's Elizabeth Montgomery, who in real life was a sixth cousin of Lizzie, which brought the story to a new generation. Almost 40 years later, the Lifetime channel aired the Christina Ricci vehicle, Lizzie Borden Took an Axe, and followed it with a series called The Lizzie Borden Chronicles. While both were panned by critics, they did bring the case back to the public eye, opening the door for a psychological thriller starring Chloe Sevigny as Lizzie and Kristen Stewart as Bridget Sullivan, the family maid. In addition, there have been countless books theorizing on the suspects and motives behind the Borden murders, as well as very imaginative fictional works in which Lizzie has appeared as, among other incarnations, as a zombie hunter and a child detective. So that's pretty much my summing up of the Lizzie Borden, the Borden murders and the case. Now, if you want to know more about the case and Lizzie Borden, please check out the many books, both fiction and nonfiction, regarding Lizzie at the Fall River Public Library. And you'll also find many Borden-related articles and photos at the Fall River Historical Society. And speaking of which, the good folks at the Historical Society, if you want to read a very thorough and vivid description of the Borden case and the Victorian social backdrop in which it took place, I recommend a book that Michael Martin and Dennis Benet, the curators at the Fall River Historical Society, spent many years putting together, entitled Parallel Lives, A Social History of Lizzie A. Borden and her Fall River. It's filled with many rare letters, photos, and facts that you will not find anywhere else. Okay, well, that was a little bit over 15 minutes, but in any case, that's another exciting installment, and please look forward to more installments of Fall River History in 15 minutes to come. I'm your host, Dan Sheahan. I'll see you next